Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and this is your Sales SOS podcast crew. Renee Bigelow, Daryl Prell, and Mike Simmons. And we have been talking about sales math, which interestingly enough, math is not my favorite subject. And I am talking about sales math all the time. It's important. We need to know it and we need to understand it. I want to talk now with the team, with the crew about hiring sales math, because I'm going to tell you a story of a client that I have a year ago, almost today. They hired a head of sales. And over the course of the last year, they hired 3 salespeople. And this last week, they fired all of them. Their goal when they hired me to help them was to increase sales for divisions of companies they already have, but finding new divisions that they're not currently selling to, which you and I all know is a long sales process. So when we're hiring salespeople, if we don't understand ramp time, return, again, we're talking about return on investment, like how long does it take for a salesperson to be producing? I have another client I had the same conversation with last year. They invested a lot of money in sales, and 6 months later, they were angry because they had hired 6 people and they weren't paying for themselves yet in terms of the amount of extra revenue they were bringing in. So how do we understand this as CEOs, as leaders, as investors? How do we figure out what that looks like? How long does it take? What are the things that impact how long it takes for a salesperson to be delivering at the revenue level that we want them to be? I have just completely blank stares. If you're not on the video, they're all looking at me like, this is a tough one.
It's it's not useful to say this, but it depends, right?
Yes.
It depends on a number of different things. And unfortunately, people inside organizations make assumptions on what's going to happen. So they'll be like, you know what? I got 3 reps who each are generating $1.5 million a year. I want to grow the business from $4.5 million to $9 million year over year. I'm going to go ahead and plug in 3 new reps this year, and we're going to grow the business because the math just works. And they don't know what the math is. They don't know what is going to happen when you change the territories that those 3 reps are responsible for. They don't know how long it took those 3 reps to get to a point where they were consistently generating $1.5 million in sales. Some people get confused and talk about sales and revenue at the same time, and they're referring to 2 completely different things.
Can you explain that before you go?
No, because I'm not a CFO. Actually, here's the meathead version of sales versus revenue. Sale is the booking that happens. It's when something is closed won, when someone agrees to pay you for this software solution, this product, this service, this tangible thing. If I'm buying a cup like this and that exchange happens immediately and I pay for it immediately, the company will likely recognize that sale as revenue. That's my understanding. When you sell this cup as a software thing and it's it's a monthly subscription to this cup, I can't recognize the revenue right away. I have to recognize that revenue in 1/12 increments over a 12-month period if it's an annual subscription. That is as deep as I can get in the difference between sales and revenue.
All right, so keep going with what you were saying. That's good enough.
So what I would do is I'd ask you to get your CFO involved. Again, don't fail alone. How do we recognize revenue as a business? And if they get frustrated with you asking the question, then talk to somebody else on their team. They probably will be really excited that someone on the sales or marketing side has an interest in what revenue is.
Right.
Right. So they'll help you and they'll work with you and they want to help you. So we make a lot of assumptions around A plus B equals C, or A times X equals B times X equals C times X, or will lead to those things. And that's where a lot of folks make mistakes and you overhire. And I have overhired multiple times. I have underhired multiple times. These mistakes will continue to happen. And the thing that it gets me in trouble most in each of those situations is when I try to hide a mistake or fail to continue to communicate how progress is being made, or progress if you're up where Daryl is.
I have two things I can contribute here, Liz. One, I always refer to when I go into companies, I'm just going to make an analogy here between marketing, like a company, are they marketing ready, right? Like, and what I mean by, are you promotional ready, right? So I'll generally come in and the CEO will be mad. They've hired 3 agencies. None of them have done what they wanted. They're mad. They don't think marketing works, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's laughing because this is very, very typical. Well, the problem is they didn't do the work they needed to do to be ready to spend that money to see success. The analogy is, I see that all the time on sales with a scenario like what you talked about. Is there a way for your sales team to come in and see success? Like, have you set them up for success? And what does that onboarding look like? To Daryl's point, to Mike's point, how did you divide up territories? Are you just handing, the old days, hand them a phone book, right? Like, are you just saying, go do it?
What's a phone book?
I know I'm showing my age, but it's a good sales analogy, right? Here's Google, go find customers. Or are you like putting them into a process or a system? Do you have the tech, the sales or MarTech to support it? Do they understand what to do? Like all of those things. I see that one a lot, right? You bring in these people and you expect miracles, and yet you aren't setting it up and making that investment in what the operating side of that looks like. And the second point would be, well, I'm going to leave it at that one and see what Daryl has to say, because I think that one is probably one of the tops.
So when it comes to onboarding, my advice would be, and then I'll give I'll do what Mike says. I'll whine based on my real world experience afterwards, what I've seen done wrong. My advice would be to forecast their impact as conservatively as you possibly can. And if they can overachieve, that's delightful. Because to Mike's point, you don't know how long it took the reps to get to their productivity and performance levels now, training they've had, the years of experience they've had, yada, yada, yada. A new rep's not going to have any of that, because there is the onboarding process, right? How long to actually learn everything, get used to the systems, etc. Are they inheriting any pipeline or not? Likely they're not. Do they have to go and prospect themselves, which means they have to learn all the value props? So you need another month or 2 or 3 for them to get comfortable with it and all the objections and everything else and the script, etc. So you need to really forecast, like, theoretically, this rep is not going to have any impact for at least 6 months. That's what you should.
And longer if it's a 12-month sales cycle or 18 months.
Exactly. You nailed it. Now, the reality is, this is where I whine. This is where the ball gets dropped on the whole onboarding process. I'll use Mike's example where I went and hired, say, 6 more reps. So maybe I've already got 6 reps and I'm going to hire 6 more reps. I think, well, that must mean that I will double my revenue generated. But you won't, because of 2 things. A, there's a ramp time, we just talked, maybe 6 months. And then B, you know that not all 6 of those reps are going to work out. There will be some attrition, right? So you're not going to double. That's number one. The other mistake I see happen all the time is, okay, marketing's feeding my 6 reps. I'm going to hire 6 more reps and give marketing no additional money and expect that they can feed 12 reps now, double what they were feeding before on the same money. That's a mistake. They won't. And instead, all 12 will starve as opposed to 6 being adequately served. All right. Or they do give marketing some money and they think, well, if you've got 500,000 in budget, I'll double it to $1 million because I'm doubling my reps, because you should be linear in your results, marketing. But the reality is you won't be linear. You will likely convert less because chances are you need to look at your actual addressable market that marketing can reach out to. And the addressable market may not be big enough to support 12, which means you can only maybe find an additional 25% more prospects that you're not touching, but you need to get 100% more. So therefore, there's no linear results. So onboarding needs to factor in the impact of marketing and the impact of their performance and their attrition and everything else. So people don't do that because that's hard. Goes back to what Mike says. Math is hard.
Hiring is hard. Onboarding is hard.
Hiring, holy shit!
A lot of people will talk about this onboarding process that'll help accelerate ramp, accelerate speed to impact, the time to value, the time to performance, however you want to look at it inside the organization. And they may or may not have that documented. They may or may not have leading indicators to help you assess whether or not the right progress is being made. And if they don't have that stuff at that point, they absolutely or most likely do not have that stuff built into their hiring process. They don't know what stages everybody goes through from the point that someone becomes aware of your organization to they're considering being a part of your organization to they're actually making a decision to be a part of your organization. And the process, whether you're working on bringing on internal customers, people who work inside your business, or external customers, people who pay you to provide a service, is the same. You're dealing with humans who move through each of these stages. And if you haven't taken the time to document that process out, then you're taking on a lot of risk that you might convert really high and get some of those people inside the organization, but then they're churn out because they're no longer the right fit, because they happen to be the enterprise sales leader at Oracle, and now they're going to play startup for a little bit, and they're just going to take all the stuff that they did with Oracle and apply it into your business. Why are you laughing, Daryl?
I've never seen that ever happen. Ever. Never seen that.
What they do is they expect that they're going to have all these marketing resources and all these admin resources, and they're going to have this enablement team that's going to provide all of these things, and they have no idea how to build from 0 to 1. So have a hiring process that leads into your onboarding process, that leads into your success process inside the business. And you can design for this and learn, and not just go about it based on some book that somebody read or some talk that somebody gave at an event. Like this is, yeah, well, it sounds, you work with people like us who've done it before, because I will tell you this, everything is theoretical until you go out and do it. Like if you've never driven a car, the idea of driving a car is theoretical.
Yeah.
Then you go out and you do it and you get your hands on the wheel and you turn the ignition on or push the button, depending on how old your car is, and you put it into gear and hit the skinny pedal to get it to start moving. And then you're like, ooh, wow, there's more theory to this. There's actually something I've learned. I put this into practice. It's become practical. And I don't care if it's building with Legos, building organizations, or driving a car. Everything is theoretical until you put it into practice. If any of this stuff sounds like theoretical bullshit, go put it into practice and you'll figure it out. Excuse me. I just went on my rant.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to just come back to this idea of if you hire more salespeople, you will, double your sales team, double your revenue, or double your sales income. And that's not necessarily true
for all of the reasons that have been mentioned. But I also think it's important to understand that when you have a small sales team, you tend to have a bunch of what I like to call cowboys who kind of rope and ride and do everything. And there's kind of this chaotic sense in a small sales team, which is fine as you're starting to build things out and figure out what's happening. But as you add people, you also add chaos. And you can't scale chaos. There's no way to scale chaos. What you can scale is process and systems. So the more people you have in the sales organization, the more process and system and order and reinforcement you have to have. You can't just keep adding people and think that it's going to get better without making the system that supports them better also. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and you can add, but you're going to waste a lot of money, and you're going to get yourself into the same situation that many organizations got into in this grow at all cost model, where they took somebody's metrics that said, hey, you know what? You should pay the base salary that you should pay your rep is 10% of their quota. 10% of their quota, the amount that you expect them to bring in. Somebody has that math, or somebody will say that their OTE should be about 20%. There should 5x their OTE is what they should return in the business. So everybody's like, okay, well, let me go out there and find a bunch of 200K sales reps and have them come in and generate $1 million in sales. Good luck.
Yeah, you've got to build a system that supports them, and you've got to understand what will the market support, what are your clients buying, which industries are growing, which industries are shrinking. So as you're adding all of these people, you've really got to understand, what are you doing with them? What do they need to bring with them to be successful? And what are you doing with them? And how long will it take for them to be proficient? How long will it take for them to build the relationships? Hang on one second. Again, if you don't know how long your sales cycle is, because you've only measured the very bottom of your sales cycle, you will never know how long it will take for your salespeople to build the relationships, get the information, make the sales that you're expecting them to make. Renee, go.
This is that moment where I do in the podcast where I say engagement matters. What happens with your employees matter. The experience your employees have the customer experience will never be better than the employee experience. So if you hire those sales reps and you throw them in and they don't have a process or a system to support them, and there's not a good onboarding, and your marketing team is going to be the maddest because they've driven all of these leads and nothing's going to happen, and it's all going to fizzle because you don't have someone who's excited and understands what they're doing and is having a good experience, pass that good experience along to someone else. And it's going to impact all of the numbers for everybody because it's all just going to fall flat. So
instead of talking about
ROI to support that good onboarding and everything else, there's a real ROI.
But now instead of talking about ROI, you're talking about opportunity cost, right? So we're thinking there's an ROI on adding all these salespeople, but we haven't calculated bringing in a bunch of salespeople who aren't yet competent, don't have the resources, aren't able to do their job. They are now communicating with customers that you will never get back.
Never. That's why I say your marketing team is going to be so mad. They've worked so hard to get, whatever through the door, and it's like a revolving door because it's going to go right back out.
A good marketer is going to actually go to their sales counterpart and they're going to say, do not send these specific leads to the newbies. Right. Give them the tier 2, tier 3 level leads, because we know these tier 1 leads, based on however we score them, they are expensive leads, and there's very few of those leads, and they're going to convert well. And I want them to go to the experienced sales rep because it impacts my ability, going back an episode, to demonstrate return on marketing investment. And if you blow a quality lead on a junior rep, you're not only snookering the company, you're snookering me in marketing, which means I won't get enough budget to feed you in the future.
Right. Exactly. Any last thoughts before we wrap up this discussion?
I have one to share. I wanted to get into what everybody else was getting into earlier when I said my second point, but I think it's a good one to end on. And that is to know when to hire. So we're all in these budget conversations and we're all like, doing this fuzzy magic math that Mike just pointed out, like we're just going to hire these people and then magically more money will come in. I think one place where this gets missed often is, what does your current, Liz, you touched on it a little bit. I was waiting to see if you went in more detail when you said, what will the market absorb? Like what's out there for the market, right? And Daryl, you talked about the total addressable market. Like you may have to, it may not be enough. One of the measures that you should be looking at, many people are probably in this budgeting aspect right now, is what does your flow look like right now? Do you have more leads coming in than your salespeople can touch in the time frame that they should be touching them, right? Like I'll give an example. We pick on SaaS a lot, right? But like I'll just use SaaS as the example. You may have a demo call that you're forcing people to go through. How far out are those demo calls getting scheduled, right? Because if they're more than a few days, like the calendar availability. Now, somebody may choose, I'm not going to book this for a month. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about calendar availability for a sales team. If it's getting over a few days, you're losing leads, right? You're not seeing it in your numbers, but I'm telling you now, human behavior, human psychology, you are losing leads, right? So you need to be looking at what are those metrics? How far out does it take for your people to get into conversations after someone expresses interest? How many people are coming in and don't get talked to within the X amount of time? And you should determine what that time is. And it's always faster than what you think it is, right? Like, I will tell you, HubSpot did research that said if you got to somebody within 2 to 5 minutes of them filling out a form, that your close rate is much, much higher, right? So like it's always faster than what you think it is. So your own numbers can give you an idea of when you should hire. And that goes to that kind of smart process that you can be doing too, because if you're budgeting growth throughout the year, you're budgeting more leads, you don't roll as to Mike's point, all 5 of those reps in on the same day and like, oh, they're magically going to get it. You can only absorb so much at one time, not only because of the change management, but what your market and your leads are doing. So if you budget throughout the year for them to start, then internally all of that process goes much better and you're kind of matching to your growth trajectory.
So I want to just add one thing to that, and then I want to hear what Mike is thinking over here. One of the ways that you waste leads is by overestimating how many active leads a salesperson can manage. And what will happen is they can't, further down in the funnel, when they can't do the funnel follow-up, when they can't keep track of everything that's in the funnel, they're too busy to do the work of putting everything into the CRM. What happens is stuff falls out of the funnel just because nobody bothered. Nobody bothered to follow up 3 months later when they said they would be ready to talk. Nobody, while they were talking to your competitors, nobody was checking in to make sure there was a next step that was needing to happen. So overestimating how much work it takes to get those deals closed is another really good way to waste resources because you're losing deals because there's too much for the salespeople to do. So understanding both is important. Mike, what you got for us before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think just 2 kind of key themes that came up, or 2 words that I wrote down while we were talking through it was, one is design. So you can design for the experience that you want to create, whether that's the hiring and onboarding and maybe even everboarding experience, both for your customers and for your team. You can design for that experience and you can test whether or not the conversions are happening or you're enabling or empowering people to move through it. The other thing that's really important for everyone to understand is, what are your standards that you have? So standard time for answering that lead form or booking that demo call or whatever the standard is that you put in place. And what's your comfort level with risk when you start to have variance outside of that standard? You either are below the standard or above the standard. What's your capacity for risk? And I will say it again, don't do this alone. Work with a team, because everybody's capacity for risk might be a little bit different. Your CFO may have a much higher capacity for risk because they know, based on the money that's coming into the organization, that they have a lot of cash that they're sitting on that they can invest in other areas. If you're not having that conversation, you'll miss an opportunity to invest further. And if you're in a situation where something else is changing, then you might identify that, hey, the reason why some of the other stuff isn't working in the organization is because our capacity for risk is a little bit different. So design, standards, and risk.
All right. Any last thoughts?
Just anecdote. Something Renee said, if you have too many leads, they're not getting followed up on, and then they die. I hear sales reps often question, why does marketing often have the BDR team or the SDR team, what have you, call it what you will. That's why. Because if sales can't get to the leads fast enough, then we would have our own inside sales team to do some initial qualification further. Just FYI.
Well, thanks for having this conversation with me, you guys. I think we got a lot of good information about how long it takes. What do you need to keep in mind when you're hiring salespeople, and what that return on investment is for each salesperson, and how long it'll take. My favorite answer is Mike's is, it depends. You just don't know until you start looking at your own organization and how well you're going to support that person. So let's wrap up this segment, and we're going to do a quick episode after this one on how do you change the math? We've been talking a lot about math. What things can we do to make that math look a little bit better? So we'll see you in the next episode. Happy selling, everybody.
And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.